Yo ho ho! What is up, movie nerds? The time is upon us once more for that most unholy of annual traditions, my 2-month descent into madness in the SuthLovesStuff Year in Review. If you're new here and have somehow stumbled across this video with 3 views, my name's Steve, and I make 1 video a year. It's all I can manage. And I've made a year-end movie list every year since 2012, and a video in some capacity most years since 2015. Just don't try and look for them. Each year I say no more. Then come December, give in and spend the next 3 months going more and more insane by the day. And this year, blooming heck, that's more true than ever. Usually, in these end-of-year ruminations, I pore over the year in movies, talking a little, or a lot, about where the cinematic landscape lies, assessing the main stories of the year, and then of course, counting down my excruciating top 30 favourite movies of the year. However, this year that whole preamble section basically ballooned into a series of small essays that ran well over an hour. So what I'm going to do is actually split this whole affair into 2 and put all of that stuff in its own separate video. Do I want to? Not really. Have I got to in order to get this bloated beast out before the Oscars in March? Sigh, yeah. There's some fun stuff though. I've done a deep dive on some of the best horror movies of the year, some wild, lesser seen action movies, stuff I wanted to love more, stuff I hated, and even a loving eulogy of Sony's Spunk universe. So whenever that comes out, give it a whirl. In this video though, we're going to dive right on into some honourable mentions before plunging into my personal top 30 favourite movies of 2024. And to be honest, there's usually something that goes against the grain in these. For example, if this is your first SuthLovesStuff vid, I'll never quite fathom the popularity of Christopher Nolan. And last year, I became a bit obsessed with Bollywood action movies. So I do think, in the endless ocean of end-of-year movie lists, at least these sometimes offer something a little different. And since I managed to get through about 175 movies during the year, you can rest assured there'll be a wide-ranging mix of crowd pleasers and little indie gems. So howie, let's get cracking with the knacking, shall we? And roll right on into these honourable mentions. So, I know some of you might be thinking, isn't an honourable mentions just a cheat way of listing a top 50? Well, to that I say, yeah, pretty much. But whittling down even to 30 is hard for me, dog. The Book of Clarence. This was in my top 30 right down to the wire. Writer-director James Samuel burst onto the scene with The Harder They Fall in 2021. In a way, doing for modern black cinema what Tarantino did for white media studies nerds in the 90s. Remixing vintage genres with a modern hip-hop swagger. Here crafting a bold, inventive take on classic biblical tales that feels like The Life of Brian by way of Atlanta. I love watching Lakeith Stanfield and RJ Cyler together, and their deadpan chemistry is a joy to watch as they banter their way through the dusty streets of Jerusalem. It's visually stunning too, with slow motion sequences paired with Samuel's own phenomenal original music, creating visual tableaus that feel nothing short of operatic. A cinematic sermon definitely worth attending. Twisters. I had a lot more fun with this than I thought I would. It seemed to get a mixed response from Twister purists. Yes, they apparently exist, but I can't say I share the same reverence for the original as a surprising number of other people do. So I thoroughly enjoyed this as a piece of well-made summer blockbuster fluff, the kind Hollywood seems to have forgotten how to make. Glenn Powell expertly melds cowboy douchebaggery with his trademark southern charm. And Daisy Edgar Jones breathes endearing life to the stock role of impossibly pretty lady scientist. Their adversarial rom-com chemistry is great, and the ensemble is absolutely stuffed with familiar faces, like Anthony Ramos, Keenan Shipka, new Superman David Corenswet, and Love Lies Bleeding's Katie O'Brien. It kinda reminded me of those 90s and noughties Tony Scott movies, where he'd just stack the smallest of roles with future A-listers or fun people you'll love to spot. Add in some genuinely thrilling old-school action set pieces, and Twisters becomes a loving throwback to 90s disaster flicks, complete with the snappy energy and character-driven fun that made those movies work. A breezy delight. Uproar. This is a lovely little New Zealand coming-of-age comedy drama, set against the backdrop of apartheid protests and political unrest of the 80s. It's a film about finding your voice and finding your place, regardless of societal pressure, as well as embracing your identity and heritage. The film's historical and cultural references bring a real gravitas to the fractured societal setting, and this is without a doubt the strongest acting I've seen from Julian Dennison, trading in his usual boisterous Kiwi comedy for a conflicted, sensitive all-round performance. I was pretty moved by this one. Sometimes I think about dying. Never has a film that does so little drawn me in more. Almost docudrama in its fly-on-the-wall drudgery, this tiny little indie hauntingly portrays the disconnect of everyday office life when you feel alien amongst those around you, with its quiet Oregon port town setting so effectively echoing the still, regimented way lead character Fran lives her life. Daisy Ridley is excellent here, so effectively conveying this sense of resigned loneliness while avoiding the obnoxious trappings of what could easily be a frustrating character to sit with. There's an empathetic realism in her withdrawal from society, but also a genuine electric thrill when she does tentatively try to connect. I think the conflicted, socially awkward introvert in me related with this one a little too hard. Similarly bleak, Adam Elliott's Memoir of a Snail is a macabre stop-motion life story that wraps you in its quirky embrace, only to gut-punch you with wave after wave of tragedy. Following Grace Puddle, a social outcast and avid collector of snail-related oddities, the film chronicles a life marred by misfortune, yet peppered with tiny, luminous moments of joy. Sarah Snook's narration is the film's giant bleeding heart, brimming with warmth and an audible smile that softens the harder edges of Grace's journey. Elliott's affection for his loosely autobiographical material is palpable in every grotesquely charming blob of clay, offering a profound insight into the lives of those social misfits you might look the other way at, and the weight of their quiet tragedies. Weird, wonderful, and frequently devastating. Exhibiting forgiveness. It's a cliche to label a movie which deals in such quintessential blackness as this as soulful, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Titus Kapar's Exhibiting Forgiveness is a gorgeous, meditative exploration of family, addiction, and the fraught complexities of forgiveness. The film's father and son leads of Andre Holland and John Earl Jelks deliver true acting masterclasses of raw vulnerability as they relive the insidious ways in which drug abuse can tear apart the fabric of family and community, leaving scars that ripple across generations. It's emotionally intricate and beautifully shot, and Kapar's thought-provoking examination of the Bible and how its messages of blind forgiveness can often ring hollow in the face of a lifetime of pain is particularly nuanced. A much more westernized movie coming out of India, Control may well be a horrifying cautionary tale of our inevitable future, but at the same time it's also just super watchable candy. Ananya Pandey is a bubbly delight as a young social media influencer who relinquishes control of her online presence to a sinister AI smart helper. The film's editing and screen life elements perfectly capture the zippy TikTokification of social media consumption, and the inevitable dark turn only just further illustrates how possible a lot of these identity theft stories can be when what we present online is often so manufactured anyway. Control doesn't exactly get existential with things, but it's bursting with a youthful YouTubey style, and it's a plucky, bubblegum bit of social media horror, if you love these kind of stories like I do. And I don't really want to wade into the absolute toxic minefield of DC fanboys, but I did sincerely enjoy Joker 2, much as I did Joker 1. In fact, in doing away with the original's extraneous ties to Bruce Wayne and Batman lore, this one kinda solved the few problems I had with the first one. As a non-DC, non-Batman movie, I just think this is a fascinating character study of a broken man, with a loose, intoxicating central performance from Joaquin Phoenix. Throw in commentary on the role of media in the American justice system and the warped romanticisation of the criminal psyche so many people are drawn to. I salute Todd Phillips in bending such a weird, toxic IP inside out in order to tell such an interesting story. Not to mention pissing off a bunch of incels in the process. And finally, what I've come to refer to as the January Void. Movies that, if released later in the year, would probably make my list. But after a long freaking year, they just feel like 2023 movies or were part of last year's awards cycle. Honestly, it's so weird seeing Poor Things show up in people's top 10s for this year. Or The Holdovers, which was a Christmas movie from last Christmas. Thankfully, I take so long making these, I get a 2-month cushion and squeeze most of those into last year's list, where they belong. The main victim of this year was probably American Fiction, as we didn't get a chance to catch it in the UK until February. A sharp, hilarious takedown of literary genre tropes and the boxes society insists on shoving African American stories into. Reminiscent of Spike Lee's Black Klansman, it's satire with teeth, skewering the often pandering nature of black media while delivering a film that still retains a complex human character study. It's great seeing Jeffrey Wright finally get the lead role he deserves, in his wry charm and world-weary intellect anchor the film with a highbrow edge. Watching him rub up against the absurdity of literary and cultural gatekeeping is a prickly joy, as his well-read professor's mockingly stereotypical drug culture melodrama quickly becomes a phenomenon. Smart without being preachy, American Fiction examines its own intellectual bias alongside the lowest common denominator black culture critique at its core, leaving you chuckling at its escalating satire 1 minute and pondering its deeper truths the next. Wicked Little Letters was another winner very early in the year. A razor-sharp, profanity-fueled laugh-out-loud riot, given extra weight by its sly critique of class dynamics and small-town politics. On the surface, it feels like a classic British period farce, but brought up to date with biting commentary, its ever-tightening mystery, and a script that absolutely sings. It's the cinematic equivalent of a cosy cup of tea that someone spiked with gin. Olivia Colman is her usual charming self, even in such an adversarial stick-in-the-mud role, but it's Jessie Buckley who steals the show, delivering foul-mouthed zingers as if she's just binged the thick of it, all while grounding her character in a fierce defiance, a tormented inner sadness, and an unwavering love for her daughter. Delightful and unexpectedly bold, sometimes there's just nothing funnier than some cursive cursing. And there we go. The almost rans are taken care of, now it's time for the main show. As I'm scrambling doing the final edit here, it's insane to think I originally had a whole other hour of stuff before we got to this point. What is wrong with me? If this is all a bit too positive though, make sure you do come back for the companion video, where I'll be roasting a few of the many stinkers of the year too. With all that said though, it's morphin' time, baby. So dim the lights, light those candles, and run a big old bubbly bath, cause we're lighting the fuse on the SuthLovesStuff Top 30 of 2024 in 3, 2, 1. One of the surprises of the year. Kneecap is a wild, profane, and gloriously chaotic celebration of Irish culture, punk rebellion, and youthful hedonism. following the real-life titular Belfast rap trio as they juggle music, mischief, and a political cause greater than themselves. The film crackles with energy and anarchic charm. Imagine Scott Pilgrim on a bender with human traffic. The hyperkinetic editing is pure adrenaline, punctuating visual gags with the timing of a sniper shot. And the dialogue is a riot of hilariously blunt Irish slang, fourth wall breaking profanity, and sly jabs at colonial history. Every line could be scribbled on a pub bathroom wall, and that's a compliment. Plus, it's all underlined by Kneecap's sharp, abrasive music. Every word of Irish spoken is a bullet fired for Irish freedom. Isn't just a line, it's the film's rallying cry. The group, decked out in some seriously sick tracksuits, bring cheeky charisma, authenticity, and surprising depth to their performances. Not being overly familiar with the group before I saw this for the first time, I couldn't actually believe they weren't actual actors, particularly JJ O'Doherty as the masked DJ Provy, who anchors the film with a terrific everyman turn as a music teacher cum producer caught between two worlds. The film's not without its issues though. My nemesis Michael Fassbender feels out of place, and the story does occasionally veer off the rails into an undercooked gangster caper. Though in its bold attempt to marry musical comedy with heavy social themes, you can see why it tries to do so much. Sure, it can be a bit too manic at times. Reading subtitles on top of all the visual inventiveness is no small feat, and the third act gets a little too tangled in extraneous plot lines. But ultimately, who cares? Kneecap isn't about perfection, it's about spirit, and in that it absolutely delivers. Also, I just recently saw the band live, and I can confirm they're every bit as raucous in the flesh.
Now, here's Mr. Midnight, Jack Darrow!
Late Night with the Devil is an absolute blast. A love letter to 70s schlock and a ridiculously entertaining ride from start to finish. The film's commitment to the bit is absolute, presenting itself as a lost video nasty from 1977, in which demonic chaos is unleashed live on air during a late night talk show. Every detail, from the smarmy charm of its late night host to the grainy 70s film stock and hilariously naff interstitial TV spots, is pitch perfect. David Desmalchin has gradually become a beloved figure amongst cult movie fans, with a knack for stealing scenes in all manner of weirdo supporting roles. But here his nervous, greasy energy is put to phenomenal use, portraying a desperate, fading late night host, both going through the motions and teetering on the edge. It feels like a role he was born to play. Watching him juggle the backstage drama, colourful guests, and the show's spiralling chaos is a joy, as each domino is set up to fall down spectacularly. Australian filmmaking brothers Colin and Cameron Cairns expertly ham up the low-rent nature of the show within the movie, slowly building and playing with attention as we're waiting for something terrible to befall it. I don't know what's going on over in Oz, but with this, last year's Talk to Me, The Babadook, there seems to be such a steady stream of creative horror talent, all blending cult genre tropes with fresh new ideas. While it's more delightfully schlocky than outright scary, it's actually just fun watching the show devolve into carnage, and there's more than a touch of Garth Marenghi in its handling of kooks and spooks. The combination of campy horror, winking humour, and period piece found footage aesthetic makes Late Night with the Devil an unmissable treat for cult film fans and retro junkies alike. Snack Shack is pure cinematic comfort food. A warm, funny, and deeply nostalgic teen comedy that feels like stepping into a time machine set to the golden age of the genre. Set in 1991, the film is an earnest love letter to 80s teen slacker classics. Think Fast Times meets Ferris Bueller, serving up everything you'd want. Ride or die friendships, awkward teen crushes, and an over-the-top get-rich-quick scheme involving a ramshackle snack empire. Between this and Saturday Night, Gabriel LaBelle is having a banner year, expertly playing brash and cocky with a much-needed internal charm. dare I say shades of a young Shia LaBeouf before he went insane. Plus, after portraying the young Spielberg in The Fabelmans, he seems to have cemented himself as a go-to star for heartfelt coming-of-age tales. Here he shines as the scrappy ringleader of the snack-selling chaos, leading the charge with charisma to spare and endearingly capturing the boundless confidence and cluelessness of youth. The rest of the young ensemble oozes charm too, making you root for every ridiculous moment. Connor Sherry and Mika Abdallah are great new faces too, rounding out the inevitable love triangle. And Love Simon's Nick Robinson feels like a real comforting presence as the boy's defensive older brother figure. The retro vibe is spot on, with a killer soundtrack and that warm, cosy energy that makes you long for long school summer holidays, where the world seemed to stop for an eternity. An endearing blast of escapism, Snack Shack is funny, feel good, and a perfect reminder that growing up was chaotic, ridiculous, and kind of magic.
You're unbelievable.
Jeremy Saulnier's Rebel Ridge is a masterclass in taut, intelligent action storytelling. Known for his ability to wring tension from every frame, Saulnier delivers a contemporary thriller that teases the framework of a modern First Blood, but smartly subverts expectations, focusing on a protagonist who weaponizes his knowledge of systemic flaws alongside his close-quarters combat skills to take on a deeply corrupt small-town authority. At the heart of the film is Aaron Pierre, whose steely-gazed intensity cements him as a modern-day thinking man's action star. This is a man forged by experience, combining street-smart tactics with an unyielding moral compass. His journey, as he takes on the corrupt forces of a backwater town, delivers uniquely edge-of-your-seat thrills without sacrificing intelligence. The film has a really subversive approach to action too, veering away from showy gymnastics and instead focusing on efficient, clinical threat neutralization. Then there's Don Johnson, reveling in portraying his small-town sheriff with a gleeful malice. A slimy, deeply corrupt figure who feels chillingly real. Saulnier's direction thrives in moments of suffocating tension, deftly balancing grounded, hard-hitting action with quiet, simmering dread. And in doing so, he's created that all-too-rare beast, a Netflix film breakout that had everybody talking. Sleep is a deliciously strange Korean thriller that lulls you into its cosy domestic rhythm before plunging you into a waking nightmare. The plot centers on young parents, Soo-jin and Hyun-soo, played with a natural warmth by Jung Yoo-mi and Lee Sun-kyun, whose idyllic home life unravels when a series of bizarre, nocturnal events suggest something sinister might be at play. Is it possession, psychosis, or something even weirder? As normal means fail them, Hyun-soo's after-dark behaviour quickly turns their home into a battleground of trust and terror. What starts as a playful riff on horror tropes steadily morphs into something wholly unexpected. The film really delights in subverting expectations, twisting its initially grounded narrative into a bonkers spiral that's equal parts unnerving and darkly funny. Jung and Lee's crackling lived-in chemistry keeps you invested, and their naturalistic banter and affection make the creeping dread and growing divide between them all the more harrowing. Writer and director Jason Yu crafts a perfect blend of tonal shifts, blending humour, horror, and the surreal with effortless precision. And as its bold third act goes all in on its eccentricities, I found myself both grinning and gripping my seat. So if you're looking for a quirky domestic horror that's a little bit different, you really shouldn't sleep on this one. Okay, as someone who really can't stand Robbie Williams, I'm as surprised as you are to see his life story on this list. But honestly, in many ways, Better Man isn't just a musical biopic. It's pure, unfiltered cinema. I went in with mild curiosity, primarily over the decision to cast Williams with Caesar from Planet of the Apes. But I honestly left the cinema fully moved and tipping my hat to the bold creative swings it took when it didn't really have to. The concept of rendering Williams as a CGI monkey is exactly the kind of weird, surrealist choice to elevate a film that deals in so many rock biopic cliches. And in the end, almost feels like a magic trick. It allows you to buy in on an emotional level, right from him being a little kid. I mean, who doesn't love a cartoon monkey? With his big, emotive eyes and cheeky, chappy street urchin scrappiness, you can fall in love with this character without the looming presence of Robbie Williams, the actual person, interfering. A barrier I don't think we get past if it were just some other young actor up there trying to replicate Williams's perennial gurn. And with everybody else appearing normal, it just reinforces the otherness Williams feels, as if this guy was destined to stand out from the rest. Plus, the whole animated element also allows for the kinds of visual flights of fancy that truly lift musicals like this. Think the original animated Lion King's I Just Can't Wait to Be King versus the stiff, lifeless live-action remake. And I guess it does exemplify the kind of wacky, couldn't give a toss attitude Williams has always cultivated for himself. I mean, in what other biopic are you going to see an all-out monkey bloodbath culminating in the singer facing off against a skinless simian version of himself? The film's also surprisingly emotional, and say what you want about The Greatest Showman, I can't stand those bloody songs and the nightmares of mass crowd karaoke they evoke, but director Michael Gracey certainly knows how to lay down the razzle-dazzle, with fantastic cinematic arrangements of Robbie's biggest hits that completely transform throwaway tunes like Rock DJ into full fist-pumping West End showstoppers. The montage of She's the One, which I'd always cast off as a pretty meek ballad, intercutting a beautifully choreographed dance number with heartbreaking real-life tragedy, genuinely lands with a thump to the heart. After watching so many biopics of 70s and 80s rock legends, it is almost surreal watching an era I so vividly lived through. So the film's wonky chronology does distract on occasion, but the surrealist framework of the movie lets you suspend disbelief, and you do end up leaning into the fantasy of it all. John O'Davies captures Robbie's northern rascalness well, and Rachel Banno brings a much-needed emotional fragility as Nicole Appleton, even if they did seem to forget she has a distinctly transatlantic accent. Were you that coked out of your mind back then, Robbie? Though I can always do without seeing Steve Pemberton's hammy mug up on screen. But what can you do? This really is a pure roller coaster of rock and roll excess that commendably pulls no punches, in either its language, its depiction of drug use, or its larger-than-life ambition. And it just goes to show how an original vision and a lot of creative flair can overcome any preconceived notions you might bring to the table. It's not every day that a horror prequel manages to surprise you with its heart, but A Quiet Place Day One does exactly that. While the alien scares are as tense and well-crafted as you'd expect, the real strength of Day One lies in writer-director Michael Sanofsky's brave decision to slow things down and focus on the people at the story's core. Coming off the surprisingly soulful, subversive brilliance of the Nick Cage starring Pig, I guess it's not surprising that Sanofsky demonstrates a similarly human touch here. After the relatively disappointing Part 2, which kinda just felt like a series of set pieces loosely strung together, this prequel feels more intimate, heartfelt, and refreshingly character-driven. Which is odd given that this one centres around two strangers rather than the original's family dynamic. Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn are obviously the beating heart of the film, sharing a tender chemistry that pulls you in from their earliest scenes together. Both share a quiet vulnerability born out of an obvious loneliness, and in the terminally ill Sam's case, hopelessness. Their moments feel genuine, and I'd happily watch these two share pizza and talk about life over another soulless CGI fest. Here, the scariest thing isn't the silence, it's the thought of losing the people who make it bearable. Throw in an adorable cat, and it's a practical cheat code to keep you on the edge of your seat with every new palm-sweating encounter. I've seen some bemoan the fact that this film failed to deliver on its one job, to show the origin of the alien invasion and how society came to be where it is. And yeah, admittedly there is probably a story to tell there, and the big realisation that humans have to stay silent happens while our main character is unconscious, but I'm happy to revisit that another day, if another writer has a strong enough take to substantiate a whole movie. By the end of this one though, you're not just rooting for survival, you're deeply invested in these two broken characters, and don't be surprised if it leaves you a little misty-eyed. In A Quiet Place Day 1, Sanofsky and team prove that sometimes, ironically given the franchise's conceit, it's the quietest moments that make the most noise. A delicious brew of horror, comedy, romance and teen drama that's as dryly comic as it is life-affirming. Humanist vampire-seeking consenting suicidal person is a quirky, sharply written French-Canadian coming-of-age story told through the prism of established vampire lore. There are certain shades of Let the Right One in the film's indie sensibilities and its thoroughly modernistic play on vampire legend, but it trades the former's icy dread for an offbeat, grounded charm. The film's premise, so wonderfully spelt out in its title, feels like the stuff of an indie graphic novel, and star Sarah Monpetit, with her porcelain features and sharp fringe, looks like she's been ripped straight from the pages of one. I can practically see her rendered in a simplistic black and white illustration. She's just effortlessly cool. Through the film, we follow a young vampire who, much to the dismay of her family, is too sensitive to kill. That is, until she finds an unlikely solution in a young teen with suicidal tendencies. It is a bleakly comic premise that delicately balances broader comedy, such as the What We Do in the Shadows-esque real-world vampire nonchalance of Sasha's family, with a sensitive look at loneliness, depression, and suicide. In a full-length debut, director and co-writer Ariane Lusais directs with a real confidence and grasp of tone, establishing the vampiric society in all of its real-world foibles, with efficiency and wonderful deadpan humour, all while treating the central pairing with a classic us-against-the-world romanticism. It's a muted film, not afraid to allow quiet moments space to breathe, effectively highlighting the isolation of its two central characters, who quickly bond over their shared otherness. Both characters are endearingly brought to life by equally quiet but subtly engaging performances, as their joint awkwardness adds a sweet, authentic touch to the macabre premise. Humanist Vampire deftly utilises its fantastical vampire motif to present a sadly familiar human world in a new light, and addresses its delicate themes with a light-hearted flair. The low-lit camera work, steady pace, gently hypnotic music and earnest execution only enrich and elevate the experience, making this an impressive and timeless debut, and a welcome reminder that even among the undead, it's human connection that makes life worth living. Nominated for Best International Feature at this year's Academy Awards, The Teacher's Lounge is a deeply absorbing school-based drama from Germany that pulls you into its world of academic politics, personal ethics, and the subtle, simmering tensions of everyday life. The story unfolds with such precision and quiet intensity that I was transfixed within the first few minutes, utterly invested in every stolen glance and loaded exchange. The performances are pitch perfect, with Leonie Beanish driving the story forward as a teacher locked in a moral minefield between a fellow teacher, her son, and the watching eyes of the entire school after one of her students is accused of stealing. What plays out is an engrossing chess match, as characters dance around each other and try and stay afloat amidst the escalating gossip of the school corridors. Beanish's portrayal is so nuanced and compelling that you feel every flicker of doubt and determination as she navigates a constantly shifting landscape of right and wrong that threatens to bring everything around her tumbling down. With such a grounded, well-realised everyday setting, the smallest actions have huge repercussions, and the film unpacks the fluctuating power dynamics, ethical dilemmas and interpersonal conflicts with intelligence and suspense. I was on the edge of my seat with every pointed finger, as director Ilke Chatak continually finds a satisfying logic just as you think it's going to do something frustrating. My only complaint really is that it ends far too abruptly, though perhaps that's just a testament to how compelling it all is. Just as the film crests, we cut to credits and I was screaming at my TV. For once, I could have easily spent another half hour in this world. Still, its brevity doesn't diminish its impact, and The Teacher's Lounge is a sharp, thought-provoking gem that lingers long after those frustrating credits roll. Love Lies Bleeding is a sweaty, surreal gem that feels like a love letter to the Vaseline-lensed, low-budget, muscle-mommy action flicks of the 80s with an unsettling modern A24 edge. St. Maud's Rose Glass brings a signature blend of creeping dread and body horror to this fever dream of obsession, ambition and control, set against the fascinating backdrop of female bodybuilding. Masterfully blending grimy, sweat-stained visuals with dreamlike neon-soaked sequences, creating a look and feel that's as striking as it is unsettling. Katie O'Brien is a beast, both physically and emotionally, delivering an instantly iconic powerhouse performance that anchors the film with an authentic toughness as well as an understated fragility. Her sheer presence is magnetic, and the world of bodybuilding proves as lurid and hypnotic as you'd imagine. It's just an inherently intriguing world we rarely get a glimpse into, and Glass captures its strange, obsessive allure perfectly. Ed Harris, meanwhile, is deliciously sinister as the film's antagonist. He's a truly skin-crawling creation, with a straggly, bald mullet that places him halfway between Mob Boss and the Crypt Keeper. The film hangs on the relationship between O'Brien and Kristen Stewart, and together they bring a palpable sexuality that's as compelling as it is dangerous. The ground is constantly shifting beneath you, as Glass twists the knife and ratchets up the tension to suffocating levels. While a lot of its neo-crime elements are familiar, all of the individual pieces just feel so unique. Its trippy final act might split audiences, but by then I was fully under the film's spell. Bold, provocative, and as viscerally intense as it is strangely beautiful, Love Lies Bleeding is a knockout thriller that drags you into its hazy, desperate world and refuses to let go.
What if I really was someone else? Very far away on the other side of a television screen.
I Saw the TV Glow remains one of 2024's most singular visions, and I feel it's also one of the most difficult to talk about. It seems you either connect with this film with every fibre of your being, or you don't. Yet for any kind of artist to touch even one person on such a profound level speaks to the heart, soul, and sense of self that's been poured into their work. Following their otherworldly breakout We're All Going to the World's Fair, a film that truly haunted me, Jane Schoenbrunn continues to carve out a niche as one of the most unique voices in filmmaking today. Continuing their deeply personal exploration of otherness and transcoded identity through online spaces and cultural obsession. On the surface, it's the 90s set story of two lonely souls, Owen and Maddie, who bond over their love of late-night teen fantasy The Pink Opaque, a transparent stand-in for cultural fandoms of their era such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. When their seemingly empty real lives start to blur with the world of the show, the film starts to wrestle with themes of reality and self. Questions Schoenbrunn has discussed candidly as a trans storyteller. This idea of disassociation through obsession in this era of early online fandom rings doubly true today, as young people look increasingly toward pop culture signalling to make sense of what they're feeling. The film's conclusion is particularly harrowing, with Owen shown sleepwalking through life a broken man, having seemingly rejected his true self for a reality he's been presented with. The concept of an unresolved cliffhanger gnawing away at your very being, as a metaphor for coming out, is handled in a pointedly trans way, reassessing everything you know to find some sort of truth away from a fiction you've lost yourself to. It's all heady stuff, and I think this film is the perfect case in point when we talk about the notion of should context matter when discussing art. Without knowing the director's life experiences and their intentions when creating the film, I'm not entirely sure how well the film's complex messaging is expressed in the actual text, which I think is why we see such a polarizing effect from a film like this. Personally, I find the intention deeply fascinating, but on a pure emotional level, I did have to watch this twice to try and figure out where I stood with it. As much as I wanted it to, it didn't speak to my soul the way it obviously has others, but that all comes down to where I'm meeting the art at this specific moment of my life. Regardless of all that heavy philosophizing though, there's still so much to enjoy about what is up on the screen. Sean Brun's talent for evoking that trippy liminal space between waking and dream is unparalleled, with the whole film basked in an otherworldly melancholy. Compositions throb with ambient pinks and greens, evoking the hypnotic TV glow of the title. The period-specific detailing is great too. I just love how much time was spent on rendering the pink opaque as a genuine artifact of its era, with its soft-edged VHS picture quality, low-grade Nickelodeon tween drama effects, and even the Buffy font used in the credits. Jane also really understands the power of a well-curated soundtrack when it comes to evoking a feeling, in a way I don't think I've felt since Donnie Darko. Owen floating through the school corridors to the booming electronic shoegaze of Caroline Polachek gives that same rush as Head Over Heels, and the delicate sounds of Taper by Maria B.C. as we transition from the younger to older Owen creates such an evocative sense of space and isolation. The film may be flawed, and its final stretch may have been a little too obtuse to land for me emotionally on first watch, but this is still a beautiful, trippy, deeply personal work from an artist I'm very much invested in. It mightn't all come together in a clean, satisfying way, but like Donnie Darko again, it's all about the vibes, man. And its weird, beguiling world is a place you'll be strangely drawn to revisiting again and again. When it comes to action movies, few left me as breathless in 2024 as the indie gem Life After Fighting. I've already said, you love to see a passion project from someone who's obviously paid their dues, toiling in minor roles and on stunt teams for years, who then take it upon themselves to pour all of their accrued knowledge into writing and directing their own showcase. An Australian actor and martial artist Bren Foster is one of those guys. A quick look through his IMDb is fascinating. Over 100 episodes of US soap Days of Our Lives, the obligatory recurring role on Home and Away, The Last Ship, and dozens of straight-to-DVD supporting action roles. And you can see all of that experience come into play here, combining compelling soapy melodrama with one of the greatest displays of on-screen martial arts I've seen in a long time. Not since seeing Scott Adkins in Undisputed 2 or Tony Jaa in Ong Bak have I been so blown away by a new face. As writer and director, Foster effectively builds his world, then lights it on fire. It even feels like an episode of Home and Away, in the way he efficiently introduces each character and their cozy familial connections, establishing the setup of a once title fighter now happily running his own martial arts centre for beginners and kids. While it can't be ignored, its low-budget TV movie vibe is immediately apparent. But I think in the case of action movies, a lot of the time visual efficiency needn't have anything to do with big studio financial means. Foster is immediately likeable. An obviously wholesome dude, he honestly just looks like a welcoming TV soap dad. He's Dr. Carl with a black belt and a flair for roundhouse kicks. And that's all you need. You care for the characters, so as soon as some nasty dudes come and puncture this lovely little soap opera, you are ready to ride or die with this guy. And when the action spectacle comes, god damn, buckle up. The film's hallmark opening really does not prepare you for the brutality that unfolds in the film's final stretch, as Foster goes mano-a-mano with an endless stream of henchmen in his dojo. Like John Wick's Chad Stahelski, this is the work of a guy who's worked behind the scenes on action for decades, and knows exactly what he needs to do to best demonstrate his abilities. Shot effectively in mediums and wides, showing the full breadth of the choreography as well as the space around them. Every camera move is motivated, tilting and twisting to reveal something or to reinforce movement. It puts you right in lockstep with the fighters, which is immensely effective in some of the film's clinical grappling moves. For such a low-budget movie, the filmmaking here should be made mandatory viewing for Hollywood directors, as a textbook example of how to most efficiently portray clear but hard-hitting on-screen violence. At 2 hours, it's longer than I'd normally suggest a simple story like this to be, but there's just something about Foster's endearing everyman performance, and the clarity in which he defines each character and their interactions, that made me so emotionally invested that I didn't care about the extended build-up. In fact, I think he actually nails the pace here too, sprinkling further scenes of jaw-dropping martial arts throughout the film that not only give you a taste of the beatdowns to come, but actually add layers to the character. For a 48-year-old soap actor to shoot to the top of on-screen fighters with his debut lead role is nothing short of magic. Life After Fighting has some of the most exhilarating fights put to film all year, and an amazing showcase for a man at the peak of his craft. This is not only a one for action purists, but your mum might even enjoy it too.
What do you think you would do to my face?
I'd probably start with your mouth.
Like lip filler?
No, I would sew that sucker shut.
Maybe the best outright comedy of the year? Drugstore June is a hilarious and refreshingly original comedy that showcases Esther Pavitsky's sharp comic voice as both star and co-writer. Pavitsky shines as a charmingly bratty pharmacy worker and wannabe influencer, navigating small-town absurdities as she, for some reason, decides to get to the bottom of a local crime. It's an acidic takedown of Gen Z malaise that walks the near impossible tightrope of keeping such a self-entitled protagonist on side. June's such a pitch-perfect encapsulation of deluded LA wannabe tropes, yet she's still made so strangely endearing by Pavitsky's motor-mouth lack of self-awareness. Written along with director Nicholas Goosen, the wonderfully off-kilter script brims with biting zingers and stealthily thrown away lines that regularly make you chuckle a few moments later. What sets Drugstore June apart is its willingness to break free from formulaic comedy, avoiding stale set pieces and predictable stars. Instead, it revels in a leisurely cavalcade of oddball characters who each feel unique and vividly alive, populated by stand-ups and improv comics like Matt Walsh, John Gabris and Bill Burr, who all give their scenes a little extra sauce. There's such a specific skill when it comes to cracking a movie like this, a movie that so freely indulges in the dumbness of its concept without ever dumbing down its comic sensibilities. It kinda reminded me of the underseen and vastly underappreciated A24 stoner comedy Never Going Back from 2018, or even Ingrid Goes West in its puncturing of the influencer bubble. Its brain-rot satire might be an acquired taste, but it's one of the few feature-length movies I've seen that really understands and captures that hyper-specific kind of droll, chronically online humour without feeling immediately dated. And it keeps the laughs up too, without ever really letting the plot engulf things. Something I find often happens with similarly chatty films that open with so much sass. The cinematography pops too, adding a sufficiently garish LA gloss to the humour, and grounding the nonsense in a visually compelling world. Honestly, with this kind of film in such short supply these days, I just guzzled it up, and Esther Pavitsky proves herself a real comedic force to be reckoned with. Drugstore June's just a joyfully unconventional gem that reminds us just how fresh and fun scripted comedy can still be. While the first installment offered some sufficient scares and an undoubtedly eerie marketing campaign, Smile 2 might be one of the biggest surprises of the year, elevating just about everything into a far sharper, far more nightmarish experience. And it wastes no time sinking its teeth into you, opening with an almost standalone short film featuring a surprise jump so visceral I almost kicked a hole straight through the chair in front of me. From there, we're dropped head first into the worlds of global pop sensation Sky Riley, and it's such a smart move to transplant the Smile concept into different worlds and genres, giving the franchise variety and further life beyond the original's more cliched scares. In an environment that's so high stress all the time, and in an industry in which fake smiles are so commonplace, the Smile's curse feels more suffocating than ever, as Sky descends into a brain-melting, waking nightmare of paranoia and supernatural visions reminiscent of Aronofsky's Black Swan. The film deploys a range of creative transitions that highlight the blurring of time and reality in such an effective way. You quickly become as disorientated as Sky, and Naomi Scott absolutely knocks it out the park as a thoroughly believable contemporary pop diva whose psyche rapidly unspools. You're watching someone mentally disintegrate in front of your eyes, stuck on a treadmill she can't get off, and she really leaves it all out on the table. There's one dazzling scene in particular, set within her apartment, that floored me, where live theatre, modern music video aesthetics and interpretive dance all blend with horror cinema that's equal parts inventive and disturbing. It's such a unique distillation of the two worlds the film is operating in, and a great example of the filmmakers really making the most of this pop star playground. The simple iconography of that creepy smile, combined with an already heightened reality, just works so well. And it also acts as a timely commentary on the duty of care offered to young people within the music industry, which, given the pop star losses we've experienced even recently, only adds an extra level of tragic resonance and tangible unease. Underpinned by a score that sounds like it's melting in real time, it all crescendos in a sequence so surreally demented I just sat in slack-jawed disbelief. And I've gotta say, in a year that gave us the substance, I think this film still might serve up the single most cursed tableau of the year. Smile 2 isn't just a worthy sequel, it's a fresh, inventive take on horror so relevant to 2024, and proves that this franchise has a lot more to smile about yet. Sean Wang's bittersweet memoir of Asian American adolescence may well be defined by its distinct authenticity, broaching aspects of the immigrant experience as well as generational and cultural divides with real truth and autobiographical experience. But there's also a rich universality in its specifics, chronicling the everyday trials and tribulations of Chris, a young schoolboy from a Taiwanese American family in 2008. The film has a lot to unpack regarding its family dynamic, particularly in the gaping cultural gulf between first and second generation diaspora, portrayed so effectively between Chris's mother and her children. Their struggles are shared, torn between tradition and modern Western values in their own painful ways, but in their heads they couldn't be more radically different. She struggles to relate to a child raised in a completely different world, whereas Chris is simply struggling to belong anywhere. In a series of lovely, slow, intimate moments, we see the whole picture. And through Wang's pinpoint writing and the many grounded, authentic performances, we can all find relatable truths in the way they're all just trying to discover who they are. What rang so painfully true to me is the way in which Didi really captures the time, not only in terms of when it takes place in history, but that weird coasting period when we're young, when life hasn't really hit yet, but every little thing is already starting to feel like the biggest thing in the world. In Chris's desperation to belong, he's willing to present himself as anything others need him to be, before he's really found out who he actually is. And that journey of self-discovery is an adolescent commonality we can all relate to. At home, he's Didi, or little brother. At school, he's Wang Wang, boxed into the role of the half-Asian kid. And it's only when a group of older skate kids take a shine to his online videos that he grasps with both hands at the chance to simply become Chris. The whole thing's such an acutely observed depiction of being 13 in a time that's quickly becoming memory. The 2008 specific details are almost chillingly vivid. The 0.5p resolution QuickTime videos of people inflicting pain for entertainment, the primal pang of hearing MSN or AIM Messenger pop up, or checking out which song your classroom crush is embedded on their MySpace profile sent cold shivers down my spine. While I might have came of age a few years before the time specified here, during the late 90s and early 2000s we were also intrinsically linked with the dawn of the internet and the seismic shift it had on the ways we communicate. While the internet certainly wasn't the all-pervasive entity it is today, but for kids it was everything. And we certainly rode the wave of MySpace and Facebook during our impressionable 20s, so the gut punch of Didi dropping out of his new friend's MySpace top 8 landed with a crushing relatability. It's a lightning storm of nostalgia, but also a prescient look back at how this first generation of young teens, the first to really come of age in the social media ecosphere, already warned us of the social media apocalypse we live in today. It's not an era we've really seen on screen much yet, and Didi weaves it all together alongside its Asian American family drama beautifully. With devastatingly three-dimensional characters and an award-worthy monologue from Joan Chen during the film's climax, Didi is a revealing insight into the intergenerational and intercultural struggles we all face, regardless of when we grow up.
If I were you, I would run food. If I were you, I would run food.
Kill hits the action genre with the force of a freight train, delivering a relentlessly brutal spectacle that cements its place as a modern classic of Indian cinema. Imagine The Raid, but on a train, with all the steely-eyed intensity and bone-crunching choreography you'd hope for, as it does for the Hindi film industry what its Indonesian predecessor did among global audiences. Director Nikhil Nagesh Bhatt crafts an unflinching experience, eschewing the glossy excess of traditional Bollywood blockbusters for a visceral, grounded realism that keeps your heart pounding. Bhatt takes full advantage of the train's claustrophobic setting, crafting set pieces so brutal and inventively staged, you'll be covering your eyes while cheering. One particularly unsettling tableau, as bodies hang from the roof of the carriage like slabs of abattoir meat, really causes you to pause amidst the propulsive carnage. At the centre of it all, Laksha transforms from charming romantic lead to a savage force of nature with ease, his journey pushing the audience to question how far vengeance can take a hero before he becomes a monster. Opposite him, Raghav's villain is a charismatic force of chaos, bringing both a chilling malice and dark humour to a role that's more layered than a similar movie would probably bother with. As the tables turn and the hunter becomes the hunted, his bravado descends into unhinged desperation as every nook and accessory is forged into a bloody weapon. While not dwelled upon, there are subtle allusions to class and caste, with the villains frequently seen mourning the loss of their own, notably of a pointedly lower class than our supposed hero. It's a rare and welcome instance of Indian cinema where a soldier isn't glorified, but instead unpacked. Gnarly, unflinching, and unforgettable. Leave every preconception of Indian cinema on the platform, because Kill is action cinema at its most ferocious.
You're a colorful bunch.
We don't want to fight you.
Actually, Sonic, I would like to fight.
Okay, chalk this one up as a Lifetime Achievement Award. I've never had one of the Sonic movies on my year-end lists in the past, but I've got to admit, I'm always hyped when they come out, and all three of these movies just put a big dopey grin on my face. And after Sonic 3, I'm confident in saying these aren't just silly guilty pleasures, or even good movies for kids. They're just great movies. I lived and breathed Sonic as a kid, and in the last few years, I've somehow found myself sucked back into the fandom, following the retro Mega Drive banger Sonic Mania and the thoroughly deranged and delightful fortnightly 90s nostalgia pod, Sonic the Comic the Podcast. So with all that on the table, step aside Oscar bait. The beautiful blue blur is here to save cinema one chili dog at a time. This time around, Sonic's back with his buds, Knuckles and Tails to face the ultimate chaos. Naughty's edgelord Shadow the Hedgehog, who brings enough angst to fuel an entire My Chemical Romance reunion tour. And guys, they did it. They got Keanu. They turned John Wick into a gun-toting, motorcycle-riding hedgehog, and he is Chef's Kiss. Reeves' hyper-earnest brooding is perhaps the only way a character as dopely emo as this works in live action. The whole cast, though, are just a joy to be around. The elegant Mr. S, Ben Schwartz, has truly proved to be an inspired casting choice, as the motor-mouthed spiky gobshite with terrible jokes. Again, I don't think there's anyone on the planet that makes a character as corny as this so insanely lovable. His Sonic is confident and snarky, but there's a wonderfully warm sincerity to him too. And Idris Elba's Knuckles continues to be one of my favourite comic creations of the decade. At this point, I don't even know what he's aiming for, but the dude seems to have found an entirely new accent, and his oblivious bravado just cracks me the hell up constantly. This third installment really revs things up in the visual department, with each character more stunningly rendered than before. It goes big on its action scenes too, delivering awesome globe-trotting high-speed hijinks that are clearly gunning for the MCU's crown. And honestly, who'd have thought that in just a few years, we'd go from that nightmarish, thick-thighed, human-teethed, ugly Sonic design to a bona fide franchise, in a trilogy that ranks up there with one of the best in the game. It's all a huge credit to the team behind all of these movies, whose genuine love for the franchise and consideration for its fans shines through more with each new rollout. It's just such a rarity in this era of soulless franchise strip mining for a team to engage with its fanbase the way these guys do, and the goodwill has obviously been reciprocated in spades. What really sets this franchise apart though, from all the video game duds that have come before it, is the script. These things pack clever lines and winking gags in faster than a Green Hill Zone speedrunner, and there's such a clear and singular comedic tone they've set too. It's neither overly kiddie nor particularly adult. There's just something about them that sing to their own hymn sheet and they get more confident in their voice each time. There's also so much heart in each of these, and they've created such fully fleshed out characters and familial bonds between them that there's always an emotional anchor keeping you tethered, even when things go fully interstellar Dragon Ball Z. Your mileage of Jim Carrey might vary. I know he's a huge selling point of these things, and his increasingly demented Robotnik is always worth some laughs, but having him in dual roles in this one might have stretched things a little too far for me personally, especially when things get more serious toward the end. Still, it's a personal nitpick, and I know there's plenty of people out there fully loving him back in full 90s Jim Carrey mode. With its full throttle action, increasingly stacked cast, and insistence on found family, it's basically Fast and Furious with talking animals. But it's also a really well calibrated family movie made by people I root for. All in all, this is the best installment yet, in a franchise that really has no right being as fun as it is. It's family-friendly fun that never panders, and even dares you to feel something amidst its wisecracking candy-coloured chaos. And that Terminator vibe Metal Sonic post-credit scene? Hell yeah, I'm 10 years old, give me 10 Sonic movies. I mean, I even love the Knuckles spin-off TV series, so at this point, I'd be all aboard an Agent Stone spin-off show. Long live the Sonic Cinematic Universe.
Why can't you come with me?
Sweetheart, I told you it's an adventure for children only.
Steve McQueen's Blitz felt like it arrived with preordained awards fanfare, but seemed to land with general shrugs from critics and cinephiles upon release. Yet, I found a lot to love about this haunting journey through the bomb-riddled streets of World War II London. Elliot Heffernan's wide-eyed performance as George is the heart and soul of the film, as we follow this young evacuee's odyssey home after jumping from his train out of the city. Seeing such destruction at every turn through the eyes of a child, plunges you headfirst into the chaos unfolding on the streets every day. And the choice to take such a personal approach creates such an immersive and at times harrowing experience. In fact, my main issue with the film is when it deviates from George's quest. We all love Saoirse Ronan, but honestly her role as George's grieving, desperate mother only seemed to take me away from the story I was most invested in. I appreciate McQueen's attempts to show the full scope of life during war, and how workforces simply had to carry on in the shadow of this ever-looming threat. But I think a more singular plot thread, similar to Sam Mendes's 1917, could have been more affecting in this case. Following George alone through the winding wreckage, not even knowing what we'll find when or if we get home. Plus, while Ronan's obviously an incredible actor, her natural Irish twang is wrestling with that Cockney accent something fierce throughout the entirety of the film to pretty distracting effect. Still, the elements I did love are fantastic. As early as its opening scene, McQueen captures the ongoing ground-level disarray so effectively, as firemen desperately try and wrestle their own hose, like a wild snake among the roaring flames. As George keeps searching, the film's almost episodic, vignette-y structure offers illuminating glimpses into all manner of characters. And it's here where McQueen's scope is much more successful, in showing how all aspects of society are halted in their tracks the moment those bombs drop. A scene in a jazz club is particularly striking, as a cold chill stirs as soon as those air raid sirens sound. And the scenes of crowds encamped in the subway taking shelter, huddled down on the tracks, paint such a vivid picture of life during the Blitz that made it all hit home in a way I've never quite experienced before. The evocative landscapes of industrial London reduced to rubble are eerily depicted in sweeping aerial shots, and the film's handsome cinematography and grandiose set design really create a lived-in world. Plus the moments of horror, like the subway flooding, are also expertly crafted. You're just willing so hard for this poor kid to find his way home. As you'd expect from Steve McQueen, the film also offers a touching exploration of the uncomfortable racial tensions of the 1940s. When mixed-race George asks Nigerian Iffy if he's black, is such a striking moment, straight from the mouth of a child trying to understand his place in the world. And it's a blunt reminder that in the face of war, bombs don't discriminate colour or class. Such moments are helped immeasurably by a particularly warm, soulful and defiant performance from singer Benjamin Clementine as a police officer who takes George under his wing. There's even a surprisingly lovely performance from Paul Weller as George's grandfather. Just lots of interesting pieces of casting here that really add to the character of the film and play against your expectations. At the centre of it all though, Elliot Heffin's such a great find, offering a tender child performance that captures both moments of fleeting joy, such as the childlike glee of sitting on top of a train, and moments of traumatic desperation. While I might have appreciated a more focused story, Blitz's patchwork portrait of war-torn London still offers a poignant and powerful examination of a city in its darkest days, as well as the sparks of light found amidst the rubble. Despite its muted reception, I'd say give this one a try. Certainly one of the most controversial films of the year, The Apprentice dives headfirst into the toxic sidewalks of 1980s New York and the villain origin story of a one Donald J. Trump. And it seems fitting it's brought to us by a director like Ali Abbasi, fresh off episodes of The Last of Us, which also chronicled the beginning of the end of Western civilization. The film's lo-fi, grubby cinematography perfectly captures the real 80s New York City, a city rampant with as much moral decay as physical rot. In an era where we've retconned the 80s as a forever neon-lit arcade dreamscape, it's a good reminder that the 80s really were a pretty grotty time for a lot of reasons. Through its small details and perfect rendering of the era, Abbasi effectively depicts all the social and economic ingredients that had to coalesce for a man like Trump to rise to the top, acting in many ways as a microcosm of how America came to be where it is right now. The plot chronicles Trump's rise from brash, young real estate hustler to a media-savvy tycoon, tracing his dubious deals, familial dysfunction, and unquenchable thirst for dominance. Worryingly, in highlighting Trump's savvier side, his man-of-the-people shtick cutting through the red tape of corrupt government property owners, it did make me realise for the first time why there are people out there that like him, and how he's managed to pull the wool over their eyes. Armed with an unwavering sense of entitlement and a silver tongue, as well as criminal blackmail, we witness firsthand how he takes what he wants from who he wants, and we see the trail of destruction his actions leave in his wake. It's a chilling slide, as we see his ego grow to the point in which he simply refuses to acknowledge anything that doesn't go his way, a trait that's sadly still so evident today. Sebastian Stan delivers a fully fleshed out, multi-layered performance as Trump, quickly transcending any physical dissimilarities to create a character that feels disturbingly real. He walks a tightrope between slick charm and cold calculation, without ever slipping into cheap caricature. Succession's Jeremy Strong too somehow finds yet another level of abhorrent detachment as his mentor and benefactor Roy Cohn, a benevolent ghoul whose downfall from untouchable slimeball city slicker to snivelling pawn stirs genuine emotion for a character you never thought possible. Though similarly, any fear that you might actually start to feel a glimmer of sympathy for Trump is well and truly quashed by the film's end, as Trump's true orange face is revealed. His nip-tuck procedures are framed eerily reminiscent of Darth Vader's assembly, and chillingly symbolic of a man reconstructing himself into a brand. Unapologetic and darkly satirical, The Apprentice unearths the murky worlds of ambition, vanity and corruption, and gives a frightening warning of what happens when a man like Trump decides you're no longer of use to him. God, we are all doomed.
I didn't even know that I was mesmerized. I just thought that's what all black kids did. I thought we all just stared into the speaker like, whoa.
It's crazy to me that we started 2024 with two of the dullest by-the-books biopics in recent memory, with Back to Black and One Love, then turned things around so completely with three of the most out-of-the-box takes on the genre we've ever seen in Kneecap, Better Man and Piece by Piece. This time, we're chronicling the fascinating career of Pharrell Williams. Only, instead of traditional talking heads, we're offered a glimpse into his vibrant, off-kilter mind through ultra-charming Lego. And while I did love Better Man and its CG monkey madness, the logic behind its gimmick did just feel like something Robbie Williams fancied doing for a laugh. Whereas here, the idea of filtering Pharrell's kaleidoscopic mind through multicoloured building blocks feels like a genuine synthesis of ethos. His restless pursuit of creativity, his childlike musical curiosity, and his higher-level knack of finding sounds and inspiration from the world around him shares so much DNA with the ideology of the Lego brand that the merging of the two worlds feels like the perfect fit. And this idea of seeing the world with such childish wonder is rendered so charmingly here. I don't think I've smiled so consistently through a movie all year. There's just something about the crude movement, the hilarious small quirks of the Lego detailing, and the characters being boiled down to their simplest visual iconography that thoroughly tickles me. I still chuckle thinking about Lego Pharrell taking his Dark Night of the Soul existential swim, and the motion of the water is so wonkily rendered in individual Lego bricks. To be honest, when it comes to modern day Pharrell and his hippy-dippy peace and love platitudes, a lot of the time I find it can ring a little bit fake. But rendered in this way, with the aesthetics and naivety of a kids movie, I didn't butt up against any of that. And I think that's just the ageless transcendence animation has. The innate excitement of music creation is also something I'm a sucker for on screen. And Piece by Piece also beautifully captures that in its many fantastical animated sequences. Whether it's the rich colours bursting out of his stereo as baby Pharrell hears Stevie Wonder for the first time, or the limitless worlds of Atlantis or the cosmos, as Pharrell starts to find his musical voice and find kinship among like-minded creatives. It's all rendered with such exuberant joy it made me genuinely emotional, and it even surprises in that regard too. As a media construct, Pharrell is usually so purposely cool and collected. So to see real emotion from him when confronting his past and realising the support of his friends got him through tough times is a powerful moment, even through the inanimate form of a Lego man. With its animated interview format, the film blurs the line between documentary and fantasy, and Pharrell does make for an incredibly earnest narrator. What I also adore, and granted this is coming from a place of personal interest, is seeing this era of music history so lovingly depicted on the big screen. I'm a massive fan of Neptune's era Pharrell, and that Turn of the Noughties Korg Triton sound holds such a special place in my heart. So seeing the blossoming alchemy of P and Chad Hugo with his little Lego saxophone made my heart melt. And seeing guys like Teddy Riley, a producer legend that's kind of been lost to history a little bit, in all his gap-toothed Lego glory give me such a buzz. Stuff your Bob Dylan movie, I want the Oscar bait New Jack Swing movie. I was so happy to see so many of the smaller details that I already knew and have already found fascinating brought to life rather than skipped over, which I thought they might be. The fact that both Pharrell and Timbaland were in a duo together at one point, and both went on to define a generation of music completely separate from each other, will always blow my mind. So yeah, this is covering subject matter I'm not only kinda obsessed with, but never thought I'd see told in such a mass appeal way. And for a full-on niche music nerd whose favourite things rarely do get that treatment, I was in music history geek nirvana. With so many iconic moments now woven into the modern day DNA of hip-hop and R&B, recreated with all the larger-than-life reverence of a superhero origin story, I could have easily watched this wonderful tapestry play out across an entire 10-episode series. In Piece by Piece, Pharrell's lust for the new isn't just celebrated, it's contagious. It's a biopic that inspires you to pick up your own metaphorical bricks and start building one idea at a time. And if you take one thing away from the mantras of both Williams and Lego, it's that creativity can be joyful, collaborative, and infinite.
I'm just saying.
Just saying, just what?
Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you?
I guess it's somewhat apt that Alex Garland's Civil War proved to be another polarising film this year, with it being such an unflinching and eerily prescient portrayal of a society unravelling under the weight of its own divisions. As the title suggests, the film explores the breakdown of Western civilization through the lens of an America embroiled in internal conflict, not over ideology alone, but over the very fabric of community and identity. Garland's brilliance lies in his refusal to fall into the trap of overt political allegory. While some dystopian narratives lean hard in one direction, Civil War stays balanced. It's Garland simply holding up a mirror, transplanting the things that have led to civil unrest in the past into today's climate, and viewing what the fallout looks like. It's not about left or right. In fact, he goes out of his way to remove any kind of real-world read by placing Texas and California seemingly on the same side. And in tackling the insidious power of division itself, the film examines how tribalism, fear, and the inability to empathise creates cracks that grow into chasms. The movie is as visually haunting as it is thematically rich. Garland's signature sterile yet beautiful cinematography lends a cold bluntness to the proceedings. The desolate landscapes and crumbling infrastructure echo a civilization so consumed by its own infighting that it's lost all sight of its shared humanity. Further highlighting its observational stance, we see it all through the lens of Lee, a war photographer played with jaded resignation by Kirsten Dunst. Emotion is removed as we see charred corpses and bodies shunted lifelessly into pits. It's rightly disturbing to see as an audience, but also serves as yet another warning toward today's increasingly faceless online discourse, where it's so easy to remove basic humanity from the equation. Seeing Kaylee Spaney's tiny frame writhing through a pit of limp bodies like she's wading through trash remains one of the most haunting images of the year. At its core, Civil War is less about war and more about disconnection. The characters are each emblematic of different facets of Western society: the idealists, the survivalists, and the opportunists. And the film tries to tap into how societal pressures have pushed each down their respective paths, often making the audience complicit in their choices. The cast is universally great too. Dunst is just the right balance of professionally detached. Kaylee Spaney's inherent fragility and likability are much needed amidst the nihilism. Stephen McKinley Henderson brings his usual quirky wisdom. And Ron Swanson is the president. How could things have turned out this way? And making the most of such marginal screen time, a run-in with Jesse Plemons as bone-chilling white supremacist makes for one of the most sickeningly tense scenes of the year. That entire back and forth teeters on a seesaw, and his casual nonchalance towards such hateful rhetoric is terrifying in the realest way. Plus, if staring into the void of our potential near future isn't your idea of fun, the film still gives us plenty of thrills, with the ending siege on the White House offering the kind of palm-sweating action meets world news that I'm not sure I've ever seen before. With Civil War, Garland further cements his place as one of the most important storytellers of our time, turning his chilly dystopian lens outward toward the bigger picture, and in reckoning with the why, uncomfortably inward. Civil War isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a stark warning. Regardless of its origin, division itself is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. And in a world increasingly defined by us versus them, the film challenges us to ask, what happens when the cracks grow too deep to repair?
Yeah, Jody, it kinda looks like you. You're cute. I'm not cute, I'm hot. Being cute is better than being hot. No, it isn't.
Sometimes, you find a movie and it's like unearthing some kind of lost cult classic from another dimension, and Weston Rizzulli's Riddle of Fire feels like the kind of movie every kid had a tattered cardboard VHS copy of, whether it actually existed or not. It's a quintessentially whimsical children's adventure that exists within that wonderful in-between of youthful imagination, where the simplest errand can take the form of a Dungeons & Dragons-esque mythical quest. So yeah, this is an odd movie, floating somewhere between The Goonies, Stand By Me, Moonrise Kingdom, and Dude, Where's My Car? It's not necessarily a kid's movie, but it's imbued with the same earnest, simpler times nostalgia that makes so many childhood favourites feel so magical. It's not overly twee though either. These kids are precocious little punks who get up to no good. For starters, we join our intrepid young heroes, brothers Hazel and Jody and their friend Alice, who go by the name the Immortal Reptiles, pulling off an audacious heist at a local warehouse as they attempt to liberate a games console for an afternoon of epic gaming. However, their plans are swiftly thwarted when they return home to find a password on their TV, one which their ill mother will only lift if they bring her home a blueberry pie. And with that, our fetch quest is afoot. And I just love it when we get such a sweet, simple, clear objective that all manner of absurdity can spin out from. Though set seemingly in the modern day, it's shot on the grainiest 16mm stock that's cranked to create this dreamlike, hyper-saturated vintage aesthetic that, when coupled with the movie's bizarre full medieval folk music, creates this sense of a world outside of time. It's such a striking look, with its bleached colours again almost feeling like an old memory of riding round down the school field on a long summer holiday afternoon. And that odd blend of retro wave synth and medieval folk music immediately draws you into the film's off-kilter style and rhythm. Like a Tarantino fairy tale, its fantastical elements take in all manner of tropes: magical forests, princesses, witches, bandits, and a holy grail speckled egg, but it's all undercut by its flippant dialogue and rooted in its low-budget realism, effectively juxtaposing the kid's eye view of this epic journey with its real-world backdrop. I've probably said the word charm multiple times already, but I really can't overstate how thoroughly tickled I was by the ramshackle, DIY, no-budget attitude of this movie. Whether intentional or not, the child performances are mostly endearingly terrible, particularly the kid playing the youngest brother Jody, whose line delivery is so stilted, the whole joke of the character is that he's subtitled the entire movie. Their banter back and forth is genuinely hysterical and just plain weird. It so lovingly captures the essence of kids being kids, off in their own little world, bickering, riding round on their dirt bikes, wolfing down sweets, and when push comes to shove, looking out for their friends. Gloriously lo-fi and endearingly inventive. The magic of Riddle of Fire isn't something I can easily convey, but you'll know within 2 minutes whether you'll adore this movie or not. It almost feels like a kids' movie written by kids, which in an age of hollow IP adaptations and blatant toy commercials just feels so punk. Mashing up ye-olde fantasy with direct-to-video 70s and 80s knockoff Disney adventures to create a wholly unique and joyous ode to childhood. Riddle of Fire represents the truest spirit of first-time filmmaking and feels as free and untethered as its delinquent heroes.
A bit worse for wear, I'm afraid.
I'd say you shine like new.
DreamWorks Animation's The Wild Robot isn't just one of the best animated movies of the year, it's one of its best movies full stop. A timeless gem that can be enjoyed at any age, and a heartfelt meditation on parenthood, the art of letting go, and the journey towards self-worth. Directed with tender precision by How to Train Your Dragon's Chris Sanders, the film boasts breathtaking animation that continues to push the medium down this gorgeous painterly path. In fact, its cinematographer and head of layout Chris Stover also did the last Puss in Boots movie, which also pursued a very similar style, taking the textured stroke work pioneered in Into the Spider-Verse and Arcane to bring the film's lush forestscapes to vivid life. The Wild Robot is the story of Roz, a service robot stranded in a remote forest who unexpectedly becomes a surrogate parent to an orphaned gosling named Bright Bill. What begins as practical obligation beautifully evolves into a poignant exploration of what it means to nurture and take care of somebody. Roz's growth from a programmed machine with one objective to a self-aware being capable of emotional depth in many ways mirrors the experience of parents everywhere, allowing yourself to care for someone more than yourself, finding your worth in the act of giving, and in the end, learning to let go. Its voice cast is also really well utilised. Lupita Nyong'o once again brings a warmth and otherworldly curiosity as Roz. Pedro Pascal is the rascal fox masking a fear of being alone. Bill Nighy supplies his usual wry wisdom and sincerity. And the rest of the woodland critters are populated by reliable character actors like Catherine O'Hara, Mark Hamill and Matt Berry, who each bring their own flair and eccentricities. What really broke me though is the film's stunning marriage of emotion, visuals and music. Chris Bowers, a composer whose rise I've been watching for years, absolutely crushes it with a devastatingly touching score. And the scene in which Bright Bill finally takes to the skies with the other geese as Roz runs after them in joy is truly one of those magic moments that really defines the power of cinema. Character, themes, animation and soaring orchestration all dovetail to deliver a moment of pure euphoria and catharsis that even eclipses Sanders' own How to Train Your Dragon first flight. It's like a parent watching their kid learn to ride their bike for the first time, and I was an absolute blubbering mess. There are valiant ecological themes here too, and some sharp jabs at mega companies like Amazon, but they never overwhelm what is essentially Roz's story. Stranded and out of her element, she must redefine her purpose, and eventually learns that value isn't necessarily tied to function, but to the connections we forge and the love we give back. It's kind of a powerful message for all of us, in a world where we often feel so defined by productivity. It may be a simple story on paper, but that doesn't mean it's lightweight. Qualities that have always set the best pieces of children's media apart. Its emotional through line pretty much brought me to tears, and the universal themes and messages it reinforces are sensitively and effectively handled, with the kind of barefaced heart only a quote-unquote kids movie will allow. All in all, The Wild Robot is a triumph of storytelling, art and emotion, and I can see it becoming a beloved family classic for generations to come. From Luca Guadagnino, a director I'm not usually the biggest fan of, and writer Justin Koretsky's, who just so happens to be the husband of Past Lives director Celine Song. Challenges is a bold, knotty relationship thriller with deliciously provocative performances from each of its three leads and an electrifying underlying sexual tension throughout. As we follow three friends through the years, we chart their ups and downs in the world of tennis and their own romantic entanglements. Its mix of riveting tennis choreography and messy three-way relationship drama is aided immeasurably by a relentlessly pulsating electronic score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross that give even the quietest dialogue scenes the same 100-mile-an-hour energy as the sports scenes. It's increasingly rare in this day and age for an actual score to enter the cultural zeitgeist, so the fact that this became such a meme and was even parodied on SNL is just another notch on the belt of two of the most consistently forward-thinking composers working today. With three of Hollywood's most exciting young actors given such sumptuous material to work with, it's no surprise they all shine. Zendaya is mesmerising and effortlessly commands both the screen and her two dueling suitors. Her obsession with power on and off the court is ferocious, yet she never quite feels like a true villain, which could have easily been the case under a lesser actor. I'm continually impressed by her choices as a young actor, as she keeps pushing herself in roles that allow for darker shades and more complex internal struggles. And Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor just eat up every scene, especially when together, where Guadagnino's gift for sizzling high camp comes into its own. Like a game of tennis, these two rally back and forth, each at different points getting a taste of everything they ever wanted before circumstances flip again, and both actors prove magnetic on both ends of the spectrum. Like a good book, each new chapter adds a new wrinkle that recontextualizes the film's central three-hander. Each interaction feels essential before culminating in one final set of tennis that genuinely plays as one of the most exhilarating action scenes of the year. Shot more like a sports anime or a commercial than anything we're accustomed to seeing in live-action features. It's another one of those special cinematic moments where the world just stops around you and you realise how rare this feeling is. It's Dragon Ball Z with tennis balls. Z. Bold, compelling and sexy. Challenges is one of those magic instances where the director, writer and actors all bring their A-game to create something far greater than the sum of its parts. An electrifying grand slam.
Deadpool and Wolverine just fucking shit up. Can you imagine the fun, the chaos, the residuals?
Well folks, they somehow did it again. Deadpool and Wolverine is the kind of movie that feels like it shouldn't exist. Yet here it is, flipping you the adamantium finger and gleefully riding the corpse of 20th Century Fox. Yes, I know how deeply uncool it's become to admit you still enjoy one of these movies, but I think that's what's so impressive here. It blew the doors off despite this landscape of superhero fatigue. It piled on the multiversal gags despite everyone wishing the concept would die. And come on, be honest, tell me you didn't have the best time watching this in cinemas. Its foul-mouthed, irreverent bite may well have come just at the right time, finally letting the merc with a mouth loose on the MCU at a time when they really could do with showing some self-deprecation. With jokes at Marvel Studios' expense, jokes at the multiverse, jokes at Hugh Jackman's divorce, Jesus, nothing was off the table. And honestly, it cleverly allowed the studio the perfect way to say, hey, We might have made a few wrong moves here, but stick with us. Ryan Reynolds is, of course, the ultimate Deadpool. He's pretty much the character incarnate in everything he does now. And while that might be groansome in pretty much everything else he does, here it just works. It's the perfect playground for him. Fourth wall, obliterated. Highbrow humour, it's a no from me, dog. But its relentless gag rate fires off like Charlie Sheen in Hot Shots Part 2. And given the density of them, their hit rate is pretty staggering. Particularly with self-indulgent humour like this, which could so easily grate 9 times out of 10. It's familiar territory for both Deadpool and Reynolds, but I'd argue it's never been better. What is new though, is the bickering double act of pairing Deadpool with a curmudgeonly Wolverine. From the moment Jackman's grizzled chops appear on screen, you know you're gonna get everything from this Wolverine we've moaned about not having for 25 years. The comic book suit, the cowl, the feral rage, 90s Wolverine, short-ass Wolverine, and even things you didn't know you wanted, like the Cavalrine. I'll admit, I moaned about him coming back, but if we're using this as a heartfelt send-off to the entire Fox Marvel universe, then god damn it Feige, you won me over. If he comes back again in Secret Wars though, screw you. Obviously best mates off screen, Reynolds and Jackman's chemistry is off the charts perfect. It's Lethal Weapon with forks for hands and added NSYNC. The plot? Nah, it's there. Something about timelines, voids, anchor beings. But come on, honestly, it only has to serve as a rough framework to cram as much cool stuff in here as possible. And I will say, in its defense, this is a really well-paced movie. Things rarely seem overly shoehorned in, and it expertly folds so much meta stuff into a universe that has never really operated in that way, without anything collapsing in on itself. And I think a lot of that comes down to Reynolds' sheer barefaced enthusiasm to go all in, and the gravitas Jackman always brings in making the most ludicrous things mean something. What we're showing up for though is the unfiltered banter, gratuitous violence, the fourth wall breaking satire, and of course, the inevitable cameos. And oh boy, this is the stuff of long-suffering geek legend. It's rare there's any surprises left when it comes to these things now. But when my boy Wesley Snipes strolled in looking like he hadn't eaten in weeks, I audibly cackled like a YouTube reactor. Him barely containing how salty he still is over the character, and effectively stomping over any chance of them getting any kind of new blade off the ground. Mwah. They even managed to turn an eye-rolling Chris Evans appearance into a laugh-out-loud gag that almost made me stand up to clap. Yes, I know this stuff is such empty-calorie, member-berry pandering, and don't get me wrong, I don't want this to be all the MCU does now, but done with a loving wink to the trope like this, I think they pulled off having their cake and scoffing it down too. After all, it kinda does everything I hated The Flash for doing, but it just goes to show anything can work with the right execution. And in that regard, director Sean Levy somehow manages to wrangle all this unhinged madness into a coherent, wildly entertaining ride. And if you actually look at everything this movie is trying to do and pay off, it's bordering on miraculous. I also really enjoyed Emma Corrin and her creepy as hell finger skull waggling, and Matthew McFadden utterly nails it as his pompous TVA bureaucrat. Another big factor in keeping the reams of exposition so fun. By the time we'd all fist pumped to Madonna and marvelled at Hugh's glistening shredded abs, I was both exhausted and aching from laughter. Reynolds, Jackman and co really thread the finest of needles with this one. Hell, it even got me misty-eyed over so many terrible Fox movies. Farewell, babyface Jackman. It's hands down my favourite Deadpool yet, the perfect use of Reynolds' singular comic shtick, and hopefully a glimmer of hope that Marvel have some of their irreverent mojo back. Let's chuffing go!
We here to become human again and enjoy the things that is not in our reality.
Sing Sing is a raw gut punch of a film. that finds beauty in the unlikeliest of places. It tells the story of Divine G, imprisoned at Sing Sing Penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit, who finds salvation and brotherhood in a prison theatre programme, where art not only becomes a means of self-expression, but a lifeline for those with little hope of ever seeing freedom. For some, they don't want to be there, as their walls of ingrained masculinity and what it means to be a respected black man in our society prove a difficult barrier to overcome. Watching those walls gradually come down and witnessing the friendship and camaraderie that develops as each inmate opens up about the lives that brought them there is both touching and illuminating. Coleman Domingo is, as always, magnificent. He's one of those actors who brings an emotional gravity to every scene. In his commanding presence and emotional depth, tragically convey the frustrations of a system seemingly built to keep you locked inside. Ever since his quietly devastating support turn in Euphoria, I've found Domingo to be one of the most spellbinding actors working today, and it's great to see him receiving his flowers for this, even if nobody seems to have a clue what A24 were trying to do with this release strategy and awards campaign. With all that said though, the real revelation of Sing Sing is Clarence Macklin as troubled confidant Divine I. A real-life inmate with no formal acting training, his performance is so raw, so achingly real, it's truly transcendent. Drawing on his own life experiences to deliver something so hauntingly natural it's beyond acting. It's being, and it's a privilege to see it captured on screen. In fact, his performance feels so genuine, I dare say it paradoxically makes Domingo's brilliant work feel just a little too methodical in comparison. And that's where the singular beauty of Sing Sing lies. In populating the rest of the cast with real-life inmates, it blurs the lines between performance and reality, creating something truly unforgettable. Paired with its grainy, evocative cinematography, Sing Sing feels lived in and heartbreakingly real. As the B-roll runs over the credits and we discover these are real people, including the real Divine G, my heart just shattered. The passion and resilience on display is a real testament to the human condition, as these men cling to the tiniest fragments of humanity they still have left, all while sharing their truth through art. It's a story about second chances, about the gift of creativity, and about hope and humanity growing in the deepest of cracks. And in the end left me moved in ways I really wasn't prepared for. It's a really special film. Sean Baker has long been a filmmaker fascinated by the lives of those on the fringes, regularly shining a light on the kinds of people we rarely get three-dimensional representations of. Whether it be prostitutes, porn stars, or deadbeat moms living in the shadow of Disneyland. And with Anora, he's delivered possibly his most accomplished and accessible work yet, finding humour, humanity, and wonder in America's seedy underbelly. It's almost 3 films in one, a social commentary, a love story, and a mob black comedy. At first glance, it feels like classic Baker territory, as we follow the titular character, a Brooklyn stripper, who suddenly finds herself entangled in a whirlwind romance with the son of a Russian oligarch. What starts as a chance at financial escape quickly spirals into chaos as the clash between her world and his privilege explodes in unpredictable ways. So, we get this liberated exploration of the sex work industry, and we get the hard R pretty woman love story, before we take a hard right into this Coen Brothers style crime caper as we trawl through the dubious locales of Brooklyn and Coney Island. Baker's masterful juggling of tone has only grown over the years, and the way he threads these aspects together only helps to create a film so light on its feet you never quite know where you're gonna land. I mean, how surreal is it that we have a genuine Academy Award Best Picture hopeful's opening scene underscored by a pure Stilton house mix of Take That's Greatest Day? Though even that in a way makes the film's intentions clear from the outset. It's kinda tacky, yet earnest and bursting with hope. Mikey Madison is so electrifyingly authentic in the title role. She imbues Honora with an irresistible mix of street smarts, vulnerability, and raw charisma. She's a survivor, someone who's learned to navigate a brutal, male-dominated world with charm and hustle. And even as the absurdity of a situation escalates, Honora retains her strength and attitude, making her an instantly iconic protagonist. In 2017, I put The Florida Project as my favourite film of that year, and for a while wondered whether it looked like a bit of a performative indie tart move. But with the way Baker's career has blossomed since, it's feeling more and more validated. I think he's just such a special, naturalistic filmmaker, and I love how he seemingly embeds himself into these communities he makes films about. Like in the casting of Mikey Madison, authenticity is always the key here. Going as far as casting local non-actors and capturing real, unscripted reactions to create a kinetic, believable energy. He always shows these people with empathy, gracefully sidestepping any exploitative tendencies and embracing them in all their flawed, messy glory. As with his other films like Tangerine and Red Rocket, it's clear these are simply the kinds of characters and cultures he's interested in. And for someone who once famously shot a movie on an iPhone, Baker has such a great visual eye too. He's great at capturing beauty in everyday backdrops. And here, whether it's the faded glory of Coney Island or patrolling the murky neon-lit streets at night, he transports us into a world that's both strikingly real, yet somehow ethereal. I think what sets this one apart though, and why it's such a refreshing counterpoint this award season, is just how funny it is too. There's always just some bit of business going on in the background that brings so much texture to the scenes. The film's centrepiece, in which Annie and Ivan's idyllic fantasy is punctured by the reality of his family ties, is a pitch-perfect display of bleakly comic escalation. And from there the laughs just snowball, rubbing up against the danger of its ticking clock drama to create a real electricity. The whole scenario just slowly creeps into your affection, and its gradual shifting of character dynamics really keeps you engaged. I was so chuffed Yuri Borisov got his supporting actor nom because the way the character of Igor so subtly edges his way from the periphery of the frame to centre stage speaks so much to Baker's confidence in the performance. And with an extended epilogue that really puts its title character under the microscope, you see beneath the tough exterior and pray she doesn't make the same mistakes over. In crafting such a deliriously entertaining, layered rom-com caper, Sean Baker continues to be one of the most essential directors of our time, and Honora cements his place as a true chronicler of the human spirit and the modern American dream, even in its grimiest corners.
We just keep coming across these people who want to help us. That gives me hope that what we're trying to do is possible.
When writing these reviews, there are some films where you can quantifiably address the merits of their filmmaking. And then there are those that come from a more personal place, where it's all about how that initial experience made you feel, however the product is put together. The documentary Grand Theft Hamlet definitely falls into the latter, and it's an experience so unique I don't think I'll ever forget it. This follows the real-world struggles of two actors at their lowest ebb during the third COVID lockdown, who decide to try and stage a performance of Shakespeare's Hamlet within the massive online world of Grand Theft Auto. Captured all completely in-game, we chart the entire process, from the seed of the idea as they stumble across an empty pavilion amidst the chaos of this open-world sandbox, through the recruitment and audition stages, to the logistics of the performance itself. Simply put, I instantly fell in love with this movie. And I can see now why there's an entire generation of kids growing up watching other people play games. There's such an inbuilt level of comedy in the juxtaposition between what's happening in the real world and the larger-than-life lunacy of what's on screen. Even down to the ridiculousness of the character avatars, creating this mad mash-up dichotomy of classic culture transplanted into this disposable digital landscape. Doing anything within Grand Theft Auto is like trying to do your homework in the middle of a nightclub. 1 second the characters can be talking about real heavy stuff, then it's hilariously undercut by a stranger trying to blow them away with a shotgun. Over the years, I've gradually phased documentaries out of my NDL lists, as places like Netflix really started to make them more commonplace and less of a cinematic medium. With Grand Theft Hamlet though, this really feels like a narrative piece, telling a story from beginning to end with rich characters, resonant themes and hugely emotional arcs. Plus, I did see it at the cinema, which made for a truly surreal experience and a few elderly walkouts, given that we're effectively watching a 90-minute Let's Play presented as cinema, which in itself asks so many questions about the future of the medium of film, with YouTube and streaming so thoroughly dismantling what we once considered broadcast entertainment. Will we start seeing narratives told within these new mediums, in game engines and online worlds? We're already seeing VFX using the Unreal Engine, so I can't see it being long before these lines are blurred even further. It's all just so beautifully absurd, especially as the stark weight of the outside world starts to bleed into this patently nonsensical reality. At its heart, it's an exploration of connection, and it's one of the first pieces of art I've seen that fully wrestles with the impact of COVID and the toll lockdown took on everybody. That isolation and feeling of hopelessness is relatable to all of us, and in trying to stage this online production, it's not really about Shakespeare or gaming. It's about how having something to pour your heart into can pull us through the most troubling times. It's about the healing power of creativity even in the strangest of circumstances, and how strangers from all walks of life can come together in the face of shared trauma. There's such a human reason why so many people's first instinct during the pandemic was to turn to creative projects to keep them sane, and it really points to the essence of what brings us joy when it's a go-to salvation for so many around the world. In fact, it's crazy that there's been 3 separate movies just this year about the transformative power of Shakespeare. Between this, Sing Sing, and the smaller indie film Ghostlight. In some of the film's most touching moments, the candid conversations between 2 40-something friends, one with no immediate family, reveal exactly why it's so important they persist with this silly project, in the absence of anything else in their life. That need to connect is really felt, to have something to wake up for, and it's a somber admission that hits harder than any GTA hit and run. It's genuinely moving, but it can only reach that level of poignancy in contrasting the hysterical comedy that stems from its central concept. I was almost crying with laughter too, at the notion of staging a soliloquy atop a giant blimp, or the way they ferry the audience around in a flying DeLorean. Plus, all the wonderful characters they encounter along the way, including Parteb, a green alien agent of chaos who tags along seemingly only to shake his great ass. And even then, his reading of the Quran as his audition piece, or the trans actor using their digital avatar to live their truest life online, only reinforces this breadth of connection, with people from all backgrounds united in the shared goal of producing something pure. Grand Theft Hamlet is truly a one-of-a-kind work. A fascinating experiment that wrestles this digital beast to turn personal pain into something oddly affecting, deeply silly, thought-provoking, and profoundly uplifting. It's a true game changer.
So what's new with you?
Oh, I'm a level 7 space witch now.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Anyways.
In an era where reckless, ballooning production budgets threaten to derail the entire blockbuster ecosystem, Molly and Max in the future serves as yet another heartwarming reminder that vision and imagination trumps $350 million empty spectacle every time. Director Michael Luck-Litwack's impossibly charming sci-fi romantic comedy boldly embraces its lo-fi aesthetic as a stylistic choice, and somehow manages to distill everything we've faced as a society in the last 5 years into one poignant satirical package. At its core, Molly and Max is an absurd yet touching tale about 2 flawed, mismatched potential lovers navigating a surreal, self-obsessed future. Their on-again, off-again connection unfolds through luminous vignettes across the years, like an Adult Swim or Mighty Boosh version of Linklater's Before trilogy, blending rapid-fire patter with sharp humour and genuine emotional and intellectual beats. I've seen a lot of people rag on the look of the movie, but come on, practically every shot in the movie is an effect shot. And on this budget, I think they craft a really immersive, uniquely vibey visual language. The DIY charm of the movie's green screen backdrops and integration of practical props isn't a limitation, it's a statement, and the visual artifice perfectly aligns with the surreal, hyper-satirical tone, offering a stylized lens through which to view this techno-cranked vision of our own future. As Molly and Max, Zosia Mamet and Aristotle Atari are quite something. In one performance, I've completely 180'd on my thoughts on Mamet. Here she's so lovably chaotic, with exceptional comic delivery, but it's Atari that's an absolute revelation. This is a guy who became a running joke during his one season at SNL, with fans playing Where's Aristotle each week as he struggled to get any material on air. But SNL's loss is this movie's gain, as he 100% impresses as a thoroughly charming, sympathetic romantic comedy lead. His soft-spoken voice really bringing an earthy sensitivity to the story's increasingly outlandish scenarios. They bounce off each other so wonderfully, with their techno rat-a-tat dialogue flowing effortlessly, and a lovely, natural, platonic affection so evident, even when they're playing VR Pong dressed in Tron suits. Billed as When Harry Met Sally in space. That is essentially what this is. Knowingly playing with the time-honoured tropes of the genre. Two best friends destined to be together, but having to explore everything the world has to offer before they realise it. But it's also so much more than that. It's honestly just a testament to the power of great dialogue, that Molly and Max covers so much ground in 90 minutes. It's amazing how much you can say when you don't stop talking. It's a true microcosm of everything that eats away at our society today, poking fun at celebrity culture, the blasé disconnect of dating apps, wellness cults, COVID, and the outrage bait and reality TVification of our political landscape. In fact, the political satire here is eerily effective. I'm not sure when this was written, but the parallels between the incredibly silly ruler of the galaxy reality TV stuff here and what's happening in the real world right now is so on the nose it's startling. Echoing the When Harry Met Sally homage, Alex Winkler channels his inner Harry Connick Jr. with a gorgeous 30s style jazz score, adding a dreamy atmosphere to the sci-fi imagery and a peppy, percussive nature to the dialogue. Coupled with other mixed media elements and stop-motion animation, it all just really works together to create this fully immersive anything-goes world. Almost every scene offers something visually new or introduces another genius little concept, like a system that allows parallel universe versions of Molly and Max to hypothetically date in order to report back and see if it works or not. It's a 2-minute bit, but it's so clever it could sustain its own film, and the movie just keeps casually serving up more and more ideas. The sheer audacity of his vision is inspiring, offering fun, inventive spins on so many intrinsically human issues, via a heady mix of self-aware humour and sci-fi analogues. Litwack never lets budgetary constraints define the scope of his story, instead offering a shining example of independent filmmaking in which bold ideas meet creative execution. I think it says a lot that both this movie and Grand Theft Hamlet can so effectively explore the real-world issues of today against a backdrop of such fake digital artifice. It's a reflection of how we try, and often fail, to connect in an increasingly chaotic digital world. It posits sometimes we do have to go in circles in order to move forward, and it's bizarre, hilarious, and deeply relatable.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect.
Oh boy, at long last we've made it to the top of the mountain, folks. Though number ones are always so tricky to pick. Should it be something that's had a genuine cultural impact, or simply what you enjoyed the most? Well, I think here we get both. I spoke about that first gut experience earlier, and I think it's fair to say nothing this year made my jaw drop more than Coralie Fajar's The Substance. A film I'm pretty sure the term needs to be seen to be believed was invented for, because wow, what a triumph of pure maximalist filmmaking. The movie is both a grotesque body horror nightmare and a sharp critique of the entertainment industry, following Elizabeth Sparkle, an aging actress desperate to stay relevant, who becomes entangled in a sinister beauty ritual that allows her to live as a younger version of herself. It's a commentary on how women's value remains so tied to their appearance, and how it's a currency that seemingly diminishes with age. What begins as an exploration of vanity spirals into something far, far darker, as Fajar probes into every extreme close-up pore and wrinkle to stomach-churning effect. Again, horror has always been a genre that reflects our deepest social anxieties, from the nuclear fears of the atomic age right through to the paranoia of AI. Filmmakers have always used terror to probe at what's on the nation's mind. And in 2024, The Substance offers a visceral, provocative entry into the genre's ongoing conversation regarding women's autonomy and the toxic ways the entertainment industry and society in general fetishizes youth, while also expecting its stars to adhere to those standards forever. With this in mind, the casting of Demi Moore is a masterstroke. Not only is this an incredible, brave, let's leave it all out there performance, but her real-life iconography is symbolic of the way Hollywood deifies beauty, then rejects it once its allotted time has passed. And gotta hand it to Margaret Qualley as the youngest Sue too. Her descent from wide-eyed innocent to fame-hungry monster shows the corruption of celebrity on the way up as much as Moore represents the isolation and bitterness on the way down. Of course, the brilliance of The Substance lies in its ability to marry these deeply resonant and topical themes with vomit-inducing imagery. And when it comes to the body horror sequences, Christ on a bike, I went in expecting crazy and it left those expectations firmly in the gutter. It's rare a film offers such a singularly unique pleasure that you won't find anywhere else. And there's definitely a sick thrill in waiting to see what fresh new Cronenbergian trauma nightmare awaits us with each new dose. Juices be flowing and flesh be popping, culminating in a gleefully deranged gore-fest finale that practically cackles in the audience's face at what they're getting away with. All a marvel of practical makeup effects and stomach-churning creature design. It's no coincidence that Fajar, the mind behind 2017's Revenge, helms this story. Her work often interrogates power dynamics, particularly how women fight to reclaim control in a world designed to strip it away. And here, that world is so garishly captured. The omnipresent hot pink colour palette, the lonely sterility of Elizabeth's penthouse, the leering male gaze straight out of a noughties Ministry of Sound music video, and the grotesquely warped wide-angle lens as we watch Dennis Quaid greasily wolf down food. From its very first sequence, with Elizabeth's star on Hollywood Boulevard gradually ravaged by time, the metaphor has all the subtlety of a pitbull booty-shaking banger, but by the time it comes back around at the end, you're just so on board this roller coaster, you can't help but give it up. Everything about The Substance just fires on all cylinders. The uncomfortably glossy cinematography, Rafferty's score which flies from pounding techno to Universal Monster overtures, the design, the themes, the squishy, squelchy practical effects, the towering performances, and Fajar's complete authorship of the material, masterfully raising the stakes and blasting the story into a whole other galaxy. In this age of post-monoculture, it's always heartening to know that a piece of art, somebody's vision, can still come along and grab the public consciousness by the throat. It's just wild, balls-to-the-wall filmmaking that, ironically, while acting as a savage critique of Hollywood, shows us a future of everything it can still be. And there we go. Boom! Finn! We've made it through another epic cinematic journey together. And I thank anyone who set aside probably an entire afternoon to watch this. I mean, hey, if it worked for the brutalist, eh? Hopefully this thing didn't fall apart in the second half the way that did. But anyway, how much did you agree with here? How frequently did you shake your head in dismay? Any unknown gems you're gonna check out? What were your favourites of the year? Holler at your boy and let's keep this convo going. I know personally I'm devastated last year's prediction of Madam Web taking the top spot didn't come to pass. Until next year though, that's me signing off, and hopefully leaving the house for the first time in 2+ months. Keep watching all those lovely movies and get yourselves along to the cinema. It's just about the only safe space we have left. Till next time, love, peace, and grease.